and welcome to the program. I'm Min San-hee with our group of foreign journalists for this edition of Foreign Correspondents. Welcome to the show.
Good to be back.
Now, we have roughly a week to go before the end of the year. What are some of your end-of-year plans, Marcus?
Well, this is a very busy time of the year for me because I work for a weekly newspaper, so we're producing 3 newspapers at once right now. We're making the Christmas edition and the New Year's edition and then the first paper of the new year all at once. So I'm going to be working, finishing several stories at the same time, and then I'm going to be spending some time with my family over Christmas.
I see. What about you, Atta?
I'm working on some articles for the end of the year, like about North Korea and about this case of the President Park. But also I will have time to spend with my friends and to talk to my family. So it's a beautiful time anyway, it's Christmas.
Frank?
Well, I'm just debating whether I'm going to go to the next protest. I think it's the 9th or 10th one on Saturday, which happens to be Christmas Eve. And I don't think my wife and daughter will really like that. But if we go for the candlelight part, maybe I can sneak in some sort of candlelight theme with Christmas Eve and do a bit of work. But we'll see. I might even take the evening off.
I see. Well, elsewhere around the world, ties between the United States and China have been strained following U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's questioning of the One China policy. We have details in this report.
A recent statement by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on China has sparked controversy. On the 11th, during an interview with Fox News, Trump accused China of devaluing its currency and imposing heavy tariffs on U.S. products. But it was another comment that day that stirred up trouble. He questioned whether the U.S. should continue to abide by the One China policy. Trump's call with Taiwanese leader Tsai Ing-wen on December 2nd, the first between the US and Taiwan since the two countries severed ties in 1979, had already troubled Beijing. To this, the Chinese Foreign Ministry urged the US to adhere to its One China policy.
如果这一基础受到了干扰和破坏，中美关系健康稳定发展和两国重要领域的合作
Major media outlets in China also supported this argument. Chinese state newspaper Global Times strongly condemned Trump for overestimating the US capability and warned that pride comes before a fall. One US expert in Beijing cautioned that Trump will pay for his mistakes as his remarks have jeopardized world peace. Meanwhile, China has been taking a more aggressive stance toward the US, launching a complaint with the World Trade Organization against America for refusing to recognize it as a market economy. On December 15th, it seized a US Navy drone in the South China Sea. Some suggest that these are counteractions against Trump's comments that have challenged the One China policy. We sit down now to discuss what intentions the president-elect may have on ties with Beijing.
So, why do you suppose Mr. Trump is engaging in such rhetoric regarding China?
He seems to think that the U.S. has overall gotten a bad deal with China, and Donald Trump is a businessman, and he thinks he can strike a better deal with China, and now he seems to be using the One China policy in Taiwan as sort of leverage to try to make a better deal in terms of trade, for example, with the Chinese.
I think Trump, he wants to show himself tough. The more tough that he shows himself, the more that he's going to get from China, or at least that's what he thinks. So if he wants like this hard line, maybe then he will be in real like this, but he will get a bigger deal than if he tries to be friendly and soft So I think in China, which is probably the most important partner in terms of trade, he wants to show like a very hard line and tell the Chinese, hey, take care because we can do some things, we can change our policies, we can. So with that, he will try to get better deals in the economy and trade.
And then do you see this strategy, seeking for leverage, as viable? Do you suppose it will work?
But we have to say that for the moment, Trump only took a call. I mean, it's not that he even talked about changing their relations with Taiwan or establish relations with Taiwan. He just took a call and he said that China is not going to tell him who should he talk by phone or not, or if he had to take the call or not. And in that case, for me, I think it's very positive that someone really does that step on Taiwan, right? Because all the world has been blackmailing Taiwan just because China is bigger. That's the only reason. And now, at least he took that call, and I wish that the policy would change someday. I think it's only a strategy, but from my point of view, it would be great that Taiwan would be someday recognized as a country because they are obviously a country. They don't want to be part of that other China, and well, I hope that's at least this a first step.
Right. Now, it's been reported that the phone call between President-elect Donald Trump and the Taiwanese leader Chiang Ming-wan was the result of months of well-orchestrated lobbying on Taiwan's part. What do you think is the reason behind Taiwan's desire to seek out, to reach, that is, to the incoming Trump administration?
It wants to strengthen its case for independence. Taiwan has been pushing for that for decades, and being recognized by the American president is a very powerful method to give your country some recognition, to gain international recognition. It's probably one of the most important steps. The other one would be at the United Nations, and to have some recognition at the United Nations, which Taiwan is also, I think, aspires to.
Oh, I see. Marcus, how do you suppose Taiwan will respond to the possibility of upending the One China policy?
Well, I think, like Frank said, I think they've got to be very excited about the fact that they were on the phone with the president-elect of the United States. But she's also got to be a little worried, I think, that she might be eventually used as some sort of pawn in a chess game between the United States and China, that Donald Trump is going to use Taiwan as leverage to gain something from China, and where's that going to leave Taiwan in the long run, right? So.
我想强调的是，台湾问题事关中国的主权和领土完整，涉及中方核心利益。
So there's got to be some people worried in Taiwan, I think, as well.
Amid the diplomatic discord between Washington and Beijing, the two governments have also ramped up their trade disputes at the World Trade Organization, with China making a legal claim against the US's refusal to recognize it as a market economy.
中方敦促那些至今仍未履行第15条义务的世贸组织成员，尽快履行义务，避免因此而影响双边经贸关系正常发展。
Of course, the US taking issue with China's use of tariff ratio quotas for rice, wheat, and corn.
Today's case challenges China's excessive government support for growers of wheat, corn, and 2 varieties of rice. The excessive government support that China provides to these growers exceeds the firm commitments it made when it joined the WTO in 2001.
How do you foresee future economic ties between these two countries?
I think it's going to be very difficult for Donald Trump to change this deal. He made a lot of campaign promises about U.S. relations with China, and a lot of those relations with China are trade agreements. And the World Trade Organization has a whole raft of rules that govern global trade. It's not going to be that easy for Donald Trump to just instantaneously alter that relationship. One thing that's happened, quite recently is that the U.S. has said it's not going to recognize this 15-year sort of grace period that China had in terms of valuing its its cost of production for goods. And the U.S. is not going to recognize that as expired, and it's going to continue to calculate China's value production of goods for exports in terms of calculating tariffs on the cost of production in other countries. China wants that valued as to what they are in China, and the U.S. is saying, look, you're subsidizing those industries. There are financial, benefits that those companies are getting, so the value of production is not accurately calculated, and you would be getting, too many sort of free tariffs that we don't want. And the EU is also on the same side in that dispute. China has successfully gotten a much larger portion of global export trade over that 15-year period, and the U.S. would be hesitant to then, see that agreement lapse, and China have even a bigger potential advantage moving forward.
Right. Quite recently, a Chinese warship seized an underwater U.S. Navy drone in the South China Sea, where Beijing conducted its first ever live fire drills last week. Should we be worried about a possible hostile encounter between these two countries, Marcus?
Not at this stage. I think the seizing the underwater drone was part of response by China to the phone call between Donald Trump and the president of Taiwan. We also saw that China sent out a nuclear bomber that patrolled what they call the 9-dash line that goes through what China is saying is their territory and through some of those disputed islands in the South China Sea. And I think that the Chinese administration have sort of talked down the phone call a little bit. They said this is just Donald Trump before he's president, not really knowing what he's doing. So I think they're also saying let's wait and see what happens once he's in office, and I think we should too.
In this next report, we take a look at the events leading up to the One China policy.
The One China policy is a fundamental rule that holds absolute value to Beijing. It maintains that mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong and Macau are all under the sovereignty of One China, and that the government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legitimate government. But before the Shanghai Communique was issued in 1972, Taiwan was recognized as the sole legitimate government of China by Washington, and groups that claim independence still have a strong presence within the island nation. Hong Kong and Macau, which were returned to China respectively by Britain and Portugal in 1997 and 1999, are considered somewhat exceptional within the One China policy. For Taiwan, China decided to use a separate name under the acknowledgement of the One China policy. As for Hong Kong and Macau, Beijing maintains the one country, two systems principle under One China. Since establishing ties with Beijing in 1979, Washington has recognized the One China policy. This is why, after Beijing expressed its anger towards the Trump-Xi phone call on December 2nd, the Obama administration quickly reaffirmed its commitment to the long-standing principle.
Some of the progress that we have made in our relationship with China could be undermined by this issue flaring up.
Since then, the foreign ministers of France and Australia, as well as German Chancellor Angela Merkel, have confirmed their support for One China. So why has this policy become a cornerstone of Beijing's foreign relations, also upheld by other countries around the world?
Right, we've just seen that report, so we'll start with a few basic questions. So why is China so bent on keeping the One China policy intact?
It's part of their identity. Taiwan belonging to China is part of their identity. I mean, it was seized by a rogue government that escaped China, and it was part of China in 1949, 1950. That's one reason. Another reason is China is made up of something like 50 different ethnic groups, and it has other potential breakaway provinces that want independence, Tibet and Xinjiang. If it enables Taiwan to become a fully independent country, gets recognized by the UN and, of course, the United States, that's going to perhaps inspire these other ethnic groups and regions to work more sort of forcefully for their own independence, and China does not want that.
Despite Mr. Trump's comments, there are quite a few other governments around the world that also support the One China policy. What do you believe is the reason for this reality?
Just 10 years ago, you would see that when a leader from a big European country like the UK or Germany, when they would meet with the Chinese president or prime minister, they would often bring up the issue of human rights or Tibet or even Taiwan, going back a little further. But you rarely see that happening anymore. European countries seem to roll out the red carpet for China these days. So that happens in my home country of Denmark, where there was a Chinese state visit a few years ago, because they're always traveling with a huge delegation promising investments, sometimes really, really big, important investments to these European countries. It happened in the UK just a few years ago, where Xi Jinping was welcomed by the Queen and got to stay at Buckingham Palace, something that almost never happens for foreign leaders. So I think a lot of European countries, anyway, feel that they can't question the One China policy, mainly because they're interested in trade relations with China.
Yeah, of course, in politics, trade and money are more important than ethics, right? I mean, we have two models of China, yeah? We have two models of China. We have a communist dictatorship, or neo-communist dictatorship, and then we have a democracy, successful democracy in Taiwan, where people have freedom of expression, and it's a country where people vote their leaders, and they have, it's like us basically. But we turn the back to Taiwan, and we only have the One China policy, and we only recognize China. Why? Because China is bigger, because with China we have agreements, because we can trade lots of products with them, and the economy would be not good if we have problems with them. So that's basically the reason.
Mr. Trump's challenge of the One China policy was followed by remarks regarding the necessity of Beijing doing more to address, among many issues, North Korea's nuclear ambitions in exchange for such recognition from Washington. We have more in this report.
President-elect Donald Trump had stirred up trouble with the long-standing One China policy. But it's not only the US and China that are influenced by this brewing conflict, as the issue of North Korea also lies between the two nations. After Beijing's reaction to Trump's phone call with the Taiwanese leader, Trump responded by posting on Twitter, "Did China ask us if it was okay to build a massive military complex in the middle of the South China Sea?" China's Global Times shot back asking, "Did the US ask China when it chose to deploy THAAD in Korea?" Meanwhile, in an interview on the 11th, Trump criticized China for not helping the US with North Korea. Some experts believe that Trump is trying to use the One China policy as a bargaining chip in hopes of gaining more leverage on trade and North Korea's nuclear issue. But others claim that if Washington pressures China with the issue of Taiwan, Beijing may instead use its influence on Pyongyang to retaliate. The New York Times said China could switch from being a reluctant ally of North Korea to a friendly neighbor. American International Affairs magazine National Interest published an article that explains if the United States is willing to play the Taiwan card, China could very well retaliate in response by playing the North Korea card. The current discord between Washington and Beijing has largely been set off by Trump's remarks on China. Much attention will be on how a potential shift in relations may affect cooperation on the North Korea front.
Now, do you believe this manner of approach will prompt more effort from Beijing to address the nuclear standoff of the Korean Peninsula?
Absolutely not. I think China is doing everything it intends to do with North Korea. And there are other issues that are much more prescient for China in terms of its relationship with North Korea. If it puts more pressure on North Korea, let's say completely bans imports of coal or other precious metals from North Korea, China is worried that it will create instability in North Korea, a country that's bordering its northern provinces, and it doesn't want to see a flood of refugees or instability in a country right next door.
Right. Do you see the diplomatic conflict between Washington and Beijing affecting Seoul's deployment of the anti-ballistic missile system in the region, Marcus?
I'm not sure. I think what you have to remember is that Donald Trump has got such a long to-do list once he takes office. If he's going to live up to some of the pledges that he made during his campaign, he's got so much work before him. So he's got to fix the economy. He's got to make sure that he's creating more jobs. He's got to deal with immigration from Mexico and other countries. So he's got a lot of things he needs to live up to, and I think that the Korean Peninsula actually comes quite longer on his list. It's a lot. It's down there. So I think it's going to take some time before we're going to see any change in the U.S. policy on the Korean Peninsula.
And I don't think it depends on the Korean administration, but now they already decided to deploy the THAAD, and they saw the reaction of China. So there would not be more reason to cancel it now. We know that what China is going to do about the THAAD. They complain. They ban some Korean K-pop Hallyu shows and stuff. But this is not a really strong reaction, and actually North Korea are showing like really big progresses in nuclear weapons and missiles. So I guess it's a decision that is made, and that would be not really smart now to take it back.
In the case of a full-fledged diplomatic dispute between Washington and Beijing, what diplomatic stance do you suppose, or do you advise Seoul to undertake?
I think South Korea has done actually quite a good job in balancing its relationship with China and the U.S. It's going to have this central dilemma all the time moving forward, as you know, the U.S. continues to be South Korea's main sort of security guarantor, and South Korea's economic interests are shifting toward Beijing. That's kind of a delicate balance that somehow South Korea has managed to carry on for quite a while now. I think THAAD really throws a bit of a wrench into this, and I think it'll be more interesting to see what the South Korean administration does in terms of THAAD, because the opposition, which here in South Korea, led by Moon Jae-in, he's leading presidential polls. There will be an election next year, whether it's in December or the summer or the fall. And they've pledged to review THAAD, which is supposed to be deployed in May now. So I think it'll be more interesting to see how South Korea reacts to the potential THAAD deployment.
But anyway, even if the relationship between the U.S. and China gets a little bit worse, I don't think the countries should have that kind of dilemma to choose between U.S. and China. Every country would be able to, be in a middle point and have separate and independent relations with both of the countries. That's the case of South Korea, for example. They wanna, but in South Korea there's a conflict of interest in the military more than in the trade. But still, I agree that they have been done pretty well till now, and I think they would be able to do it, even if the relations of U.S. and China get a little bit worse. I think it would be not that difficult for South Korea to keep balance and to keep the economic alliance with China plus the military alliance with the U.S.
And even that candidate, Moon Jae-in, that I mentioned, he visited the Seoul Foreign Correspondents Club last week. He said that he wanted a good relationship with the United States and to maintain the alliance with the United States, at the same time saying that he wanted to sort of review that and develop and maintain good relations with China as well.
Well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Foreign Correspondents. What are your thoughts on today's discussion, Marcus?
Well, I think this is definitely a discussion we'll be having again once Donald Trump takes office. The South China Sea, the U.S.-China relations is a really, really important issue that's going to be interesting to follow going forward.
Okay.
Well, I just on my line before, I just would like to be a first step for someday Taiwan to be recognized as a country and as an independent state.
I see. Okay.
Well, while Donald Trump might want to concentrate on the economy, foreign policy issues are going to be taking up some of his time, and we should be used to seeing these sort of conflicts come up once Trump becomes president.
Right. Now, like we just said, according to Oxford dictionaries, the word is post truth for 2016, while the Collins Dictionary says the word of the year is Brexit, and Dictionary.com claims the word is xenophobia. Now, post-truth, Brexit, xenophobia, all these words appear to reflect many of the events of the year 2016. Thank you for watching.